I made a video not too long ago talking about how Madoka could potentially become an evil witch in the next Madoka Magica movie, and just recently I came up with a theory as to how it could happen, thanks to a certain character that hasn't really been spoken of very much since the concept trailer has been released. That's coming up next, so stay tuned.
Hey, this is Mommy Sexual reporting for duty.
One character that has been featured throughout the concept trailer but has not really been spoken of very much by fans is the infamous character known as Kyubey. If you watch very carefully in this video, you can see that Kyubey is frequently being shown and he's not really doing anything aside from just watching, meaning observing. Now, one thing to keep in mind about Kyubey is that he has been the constant manipulator throughout the Madoka Magica series. I feel like Kyubey is going to play a massive role in once again manipulating all the girls within the series so that he is able to understand how the law of cycles work so that he can find a way to take control of it. And one reason why this could be the case, aside from the fact that Kyubey's overall mission is to find a way to solve the entropy problem with energy, we know that in the third movie he was not treated very well by Homura by the time we got to the end, and based on how he looked, meaning based on how his eyes look in this particular scene, one could assume that perhaps Kyubey is starting to feel some type of emotion, which could mean that he could undergo some type of change or some type of character development. And how Kyubey could develop on an emotional level is honestly really hard for me to say, but if anybody has any ideas how Kyubey could potentially feel emotion and what could come of it, then let me know. But I feel like one big role that Kyubey is going to play is he's going to be a catalyst for why Madoka could become an evil witch. And the reason that I say this is because Kyubey is seen watching Madoka frequently in the concept trailer, and it goes without saying that Kyubey probably knows that Madoka is connected to the law of cycles in some way. So as a result, that may inspire him to want to make contact with the Madoka that is within Homura's fabricated world in order to try to understand and possibly tamper with the law of cycles because of the fact that a piece of it is within range of him. So I could see Kyubey approaching Madoka and somehow manipulating her. And the reason why this could work is because of the fact that the Madoka that's in Homura's world does not seem to have any memories of being a goddess as well as the past, so she doesn't know that she should stay away from Kyubey, and we all know that Kyubey is an awesome manipulator. So if Madoka does not know anything about Kyubey and Kyubey approaches her, then that essentially puts Kyubey in a position to get whatever he wants out of Madoka. And I believe that his curiosity is going to lead him to somehow get Madoka to transform or possibly fall into despair and become her witch counterpart. Now, how Kyubey can do this is questionable, but I mentioned in an earlier video that one reason that Madoka could transform into a witch has to do with all the changes that she has undergone due to Homura, and Kyubey could mention this to Madoka. Like, it could be a thing where Kyubey takes advantage of the fact that Homura has trapped Madoka into this fabricated world, and all Kyubey really has to do is tell her that Homura is forcing her to be the type of person that she is. All Kyubey really has to do is talk about the events of the past to Madoka and convince Madoka that Homura has been lying to her this whole time, which in a lot of ways she has, because we know that Homura doesn't want Madoka to become a god again, and we know that from the concept trailer that Homura could potentially be filling Madoka's head with her ideals and forcing her to think and accept things the way that she wants her to. And Kyubey could bring this to Madoka's attention, which in turn could confuse her and make her question Homura and everything that's happened to her up to this point. I feel that in Madoka's confusion is how Kyubey could somehow push Madoka and manipulate her to become a witch. Another thing that I noticed is that if you check out this image of the concept trailer here, where you have Sayaka on the ground, and then you can see her witch looking as though it's going to fight something. It's unclear what that other figure is, but I'm assuming it could be a raft. So what I'm getting from this is that Kyubey could possibly be conducting an experiment that relates to witches and the law of cycles, meaning Sayaka could potentially be being used as an experiment in this image in order to eventually help Kyubey to understand how to utilize Madoka and to turn her into a witch as well, so that he can somehow learn something more about the law of cycles and witches themselves. Ultimately, what he learns about Sayaka, meaning what he learns about witches through her, as well as what he learns about the law of cycles, is information that Kyubey is going to utilize and use on Madoka.